That's such a journey, and you've met so many amazing people, and you've debated so many different angles and things.
Yeah.
Where's it led you to?
Well, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism stuff. I've spoken about this a lot on my show.
What does that mean?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, it was really popular, the debates that they were doing. They called it new atheism.
Yeah.
And it was this body of like atheist thought with the God delusion and this kind of stuff, which was really popular. And it had this sort of quite strident, debate me bro kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought that was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then running the podcast, what I've realized is this is far more interesting and intricate. And I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before. So, I'm still not a Christian.
I'm Braxton Hunter, and I'm with Brett Nicholson here today, and we're going to talk a little bit about this clip with Bear Grylls and Alex O'Connor. Alex came out of the new atheist movement, and he was definitely one of those debate me bro type guys. One of his heroes was Matt Dillahunty, who I've debated. In fact, Alex and I were scheduled to debate at one point, but what I want you to see out of this is he says he's outgrown the new atheist movement, that this whole debate me bro, you believe in a sky daddy, if I chant evolution enough, then it means Christianity is false or something like that. And he's kind of moved on from that, and he's found a more grown-up version of this whole thing. Now, I'm here with Brett Nicholson, who is my pastor, and Brett, you were pastoring during that period of time when the new atheist movement in the mid to late 2000s and maybe a few years after that was really popular. So if someone kind of came and brought that sort of an attitude to you in your church at that time, you were even then had the mindset and the philosophy of we bring our brain to church. It's okay to bring your brain to church. Well, how can it be okay to bring your brain to church, Pastor Brett, when to someone who's a new atheist, it sounds like, well, look, this is just a book of fairy tales. Did you ever address that kind of thing?
Yeah, because it was a movement, and I would say that it was in some ways a healthy thing. I think it paid off for the very reasons he's talking about, because the thing that used to drive me crazy about it was, and this was complaints, I think Jordan Peterson threw at them, David Bentley Hart did a good job of throwing at that group of people. They were criticizing something they really didn't know a whole lot about. They were criticizing the sort of cultural version, which understandably, a lot of us have had experience in church, and so it was kind of an easy target in a sense, like just the pop culture within church, and really not getting down to the brass tacks. And what's happened now is Alex O'Connor is he talked to people that really do know what they're talking about, and so I think that's it's credit to him, because it shows that he is a genuinely thoughtful person. And that's what I was hoping people would be.
Yeah, this is one of the things I've always liked about Alex. I mean, I really did, even when he was still very much kind of seemingly one of the new atheist type guys, he did present to me as someone who is at least trying to get to the truth. He really does value that. There's a virtue there that he sees, and he wants to get to it. And what you said is so true. During the new atheist period, you had Christopher Hitchens was one of the greatest speakers. I mean, you would listen to him and it would just be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how the Christian guy is going to manage, because whatever he says at least won't sound as good as when Christopher Hitchens is talking.
Exactly.
But the truth about it all is, in his book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, provocative title, he doesn't really address too much the standard arguments for God's existence that are given by Christian apologists. It's mostly rhetoric, but he was really good with rhetoric. Similarly, Richard Dawkins is a career scientist, but he's not a philosopher, and as a result, we see what happens when Dinesh D'Souza used to say, when you let a scientist out of the lab, you get something like his book, The God Delusion, where much of the book kind of focuses on ideas that have been addressed for so long, and like, where did God come from, and all these kind of things, which is a good question. We got videos on that. But we've kind of matured from that now. Alex has matured from that. He's even said similar to what I just said about those characters. And so I'm glad to see that. But let's see so he says that maybe Christianity is more plausible than he initially thought. Let's hear him talk a little bit more about that.
A good friend of mine said to me once, when there's all this discussion about whether we have the real words of Jesus and whether the Gospels are accurate and whether it's all apocryphal stories, he said that because these were written from early church traditions, Jesus was a real man who was doing real things, we can still know a lot about the character of Jesus. He said, imagine if, for example, have you heard of the Churchillian drift, where like quotes get attributed to Churchill, even though he never said them? Same thing happens with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And he said, imagine if the only information you had historically about Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes that he never actually said, but that people believed he said. You'd still get a pretty good picture of the kind of person Winston Churchill was.
That's worst case scenario. You still get a pretty good...
You're still getting an image. And so I'm really interested in the scholarly stuff and like, well, did Jesus really say that? Was this an interpolation? Blah, blah, blah. Is this a translation thing? But the thing that's most fascinating to me below all of that is like, who was this guy and what was he doing to cause all of this? Even if it's a bunch of confusion and confused timelines, and even if some stories got in there that shouldn't have got in there, the fact that this scramble to write all of this down and turn it into
even with the drift.
Exactly. It's
Yeah, so when it comes to this, I love this because Alex is actually going farther than a lot of Christian apologists will go in kind of making a case. He's saying, well, look, even if some of this isn't true, even if some of it's mixed around and maybe it's been recast and all of those kind of things, well, the truth is it's still, you can still get to some things that are true about this figure. Just like if you had something like that for Churchill, you could still get to Churchill. One of the examples that jumps to my mind is that is similar to that is when you look at the Gospels, Jesus used the phrase Son of Man to refer to himself many, many times in the Gospels. But it's only mentioned, Son of Man is only mentioned like twice elsewhere outside of the Gospels in the New Testament, once in Acts and once in Revelation. So what do you get from that? Well, it makes scholarship look at that and say, okay, this looks like some internal evidence in the Bible that Jesus really did think of himself as the Son of Man, this sort of messianic idea. He really did see himself that way because none of the later Christian writers would have put that on his lips. Because if they were making that up for Jesus to say about himself, well, then why didn't they back that up and use that title for him later? It's internal stuff that helps us to get, you don't have to think that any of this is, or much of it is necessarily true to understand, well, this looks like the historical Jesus really said this. Now, on to what he's saying about this. Mike Lycona, a friend of mine and has spoken at the church that Pastor Brett pastors here, One Life Church, and he has written a book called Why Are There Differences in the Gospels? And what he did was he took the literary devices, the compositional devices that were in use by Plutarch, who wrote a bunch of lives or biographies in Greco-Roman biography, and the Gospels are supposed to be kind of in that same genre or one that has a lot of affinities with that. And so he said, okay, well, Plutarch's doing this, so let's see if it looks like there's any of that going on in the New Testament. And some of it is just focusing on one person instead of three people, so maybe one gospel has three people there. Well, you only see one in another gospel, and it's like, well, he's spotlighting that. Or maybe you could move things around and theme them a little bit. And the idea is just they didn't write history the way that we write history in the 21st century. There's another approach to that. There's a big debate between that sort of approach and the approach of someone like Lydia McGrew that is more harmonization. It's, well, no, these things still fit together if you just understand them properly, but there's a big debate around this. And when Alex sees this stuff and sees what is said about Jesus and all of that, he seems to be okay with that to a certain degree. And so, I think that is helpful because what it shows me is he's not... If you're doing that, it doesn't seem like you're looking for a way to smack this down. Instead, it looks like you're trying to get to the truth, even if it stretches your expectations a little bit. Now, Pastor Brett, give me a pastoral thought on this. When you're thinking about Bible contradictions and what the Bible has to say and how all that works, and you get challenges to the Bible specifically, what's been your approach? Is there a resource you recommend? How do you look at that?
If it's someone, I think it's critical to be like what you've just described Alex O'Connor as. If you're looking for the truth, and something I've shared with people has said, just remove the feel like you've got to assume the Bible is supernatural in its character. Just start there. Again, I don't say that to Christians. I say it to people that are exploring. Just say, think of it as the founding documents of the Christian faith, in the same way you would think of the founding documents of any number, the country or whatever else, and just read it as literature in that sense, and just listen for the authenticity, listen to the personalities, listen to the story as it were. And I think if people will get rid of sort of that veneer that they assume is in the supernatural character, because there's a lot of assumptions we put on that. If we have that, if we think, oh, the Bible's supernatural, well, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Just go back and be a responsible reader, amateur historian. People tell stories this way. We'll leave characters out of our stories because they're not relevant to who we're talking to at the moment. There's things like that that go on now, and they're a lot more relatable. If you read the letter of Paul, you don't have to believe his letter to the Galatians is supernatural. Just read it and just listen to the kind of things he said. What did he emphasize? What did the Gospels emphasize? And I think it humanizes it in a good sense and makes it more realistic. And that's where I'd always try to get people to do. And let's talk about that, and then we can step into who do you really think Jesus is, and is the case made, so to speak.
Yeah, as we go back into the clip, I just want to say that Alex had Jordan Peterson on his show and has interacted with him quite a bit. And Jordan Peterson has been someone that it's really hard to nail down. Okay, what exactly are you saying you believe about is the resurrection of Jesus a historical, bodily, physical event or not? Alex, to his credit, is perhaps the only person who's ever gotten a straightforward answer on that. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. I'll tell you more about it. But here we're asking if you could, he's been asked, if you could go back in time, what would you want to see? And of course, he's like, well, it has to be Jesus. So let's jump in and see what he says here.
Although, yeah, you want to see the resurrection, you want to see part of me wants to say I would just like to meet him walking along during his ministry and just say, listen, man, I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Who are you? Like,
are you the real deal?
Are you Messiah? Are you God? Are you claiming to be God? Like, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to ask that question. And I mean, where would you go?
Yeah, we don't need to know where Bear Grylls goes. But the bottom line about this is he did start, and we didn't show it in the clip, where he says, I'd want to see the crucifixion. And the reason he says is because I want to see, like, does the sky go dark and does the veil tear and all these kind of things. Now, the interesting thing about that is that is something that the aforementioned scholar Mike Licona that I mentioned has been criticized a lot for, because he thinks that those things could be something used as a compositional device in the story, kind of like portends, or if you've ever seen like a painting of some historical figure, and in the background there might be an army because this guy was a great warrior, or a dog because sitting loyally because this guy's loyal, or whatever.
He is on Bear Grylls' lap. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so so when we look at this, he says maybe those things are there, and people might have understood that at the time. Not that he's getting history wrong, but maybe they wrote history differently. Others, and kind of I'm in this camp, say, no, I believe those things literally happen. And if you went back in time, like he's saying, you'd see them. And so I think that's interesting, because I think even if he didn't see those things, there is an option there for something that was, maybe something else going on in the literature. But he does say here that he would like to just go up and talk to him. And I just thought about the Jordan Peterson thing. I'm like, hey, this is what he did to Jordan Peterson. Now you answer this question. We're asking a straightforward question here. And he would want that from Jesus is, wait a minute, if people are saying that you're God, are you God in the flesh? I love that. The Jordan Peterson thing was, he said, if we had a Panasonic digital camera pointed at the opening of the tomb, do you, Jordan Peterson, believe that we would have seen a man coming out of that tomb? And Peterson says, I suspect so, which was, the closest we got to an affirmation of anything like that. Well, here he's saying he would do the same thing with Jesus. And I'd say that would be a good conversation. And I wish he got that option. And so what that tells me again is it hints again at Alex really does. I mean, why would a guy who's not even a believer want to go see Jesus? Well, because if it's true, he understands how important it is. And it looks to me like that's the kind of statement someone makes if they're looking for the truth. And so we're just going to keep praying that Alex gets there. I know one thing he does that I encourage any unbelievers to do is he surrounds himself with believers, or at least he has done, and live with them, go to church with them, try to put himself in the community of faith, because that's part of what the Christian faith is about that community. Now, all that set aside, I've got to know from my pastor, Brett, if you could go anywhere and see anything, and it could be biblical, but not Jesus, You have to take Jesus out because then everybody just says Jesus, Sunday school answer, right?
Sure, yeah.
But if you could go anywhere and see any historical event, where would you go?
Oh dear. I think, as I think about that, I think I would choose David dancing before the ark. That it is in the Bible, because for me that has layers and layers and layers of meaning that we don't have time to get into. But that would be it. I want to see that actual thing because I think it speaks volumes of to see that it happened and why it happened and what it really looked like when he was dancing. And again, there's lots of reasons for that. But,
I love that. That is good. And while Alex wants to go check on Jesus and make sure that's all true, by the way, they have a great discussion in this video about John the Baptist and how he's the greatest and all that, but yet still he experienced doubt when he was in captivity, or at least wanted to know an answer. I thought that was great. But I think while he's taking care of the New Testament, what I'll do is I'll go back to the first day listed in creation and figure out for sure what exactly is going on, so I could just come back and say, read it and weep, heretics, and that'd be the end of it.
There you go.
So anyway, this has been great. Let's keep praying for Alex, and Brett, thanks for being on the show today.
Amen.